My name is Daniel Hayes. I'm 35 years old, born and raised in a small town outside of Dayton, Ohio. Folks around here know me as the guy who always wanted more than what this place could offer. But if I'm being honest, the story I'm about to tell you isn't about ambition or chasing dreams. It's about a mistake I can't undo. See, when I was younger, I thought my father was just another small-town man with no vision. He worked at the same auto repair shop for 30 years, wore the same faded blue overalls every day, and came home with grease under his fingernails. To me, back then, that wasn't something to be proud of. It was something to escape from. But here's the truth. The day I turned my back on him, I thought I was stepping into a better life. I thought I was proving myself, showing the world I didn't need to be like him. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't just walking away from my father. I was walking away from the only person who had ever truly stood by me, and by the time I understood that, it was too late. My dad's name was Richard Hayes. Everyone in town called him Richie, even though he never had much money. What he did have was pride in his work. I can still picture him standing in the driveway after a long day at the shop, wiping his hands on a rag, the smell of motor oil clinging to his clothes. He didn't complain, not once. If the rent was due, he worked an extra shift. If the roof leaked, he patched it himself. Growing up, I didn't see the sacrifice. I only saw the limits. While my friends bragged about vacations, new sneakers, or the latest gadgets, I looked at my dad and thought, why can't you give me more? He had this old pickup truck, a rusted-out Ford from the 70s. It barely ran, but he kept fixing it instead of buying something new. I used to be embarrassed when he drove me to school in it. I'd duck down in the seat so no one would see me. He noticed once, I'm sure of it, but he didn't say anything. That was my dad. Quiet, steady, never making me feel guilty even when I deserved to. At night he'd sit at the kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, his hands rough and cracked, staring at bills like they were some puzzle he could solve with enough patience. And when I'd ask him why he never thought about leaving this town, he'd just smile and say, because this is home, Danny. And home ain't something you run away from. But I didn't get it then. All I could think was how badly I wanted to run. My name is Daniel Hayes. I'm 35 years old, born and raised in a small town outside of Dayton, Ohio. Folks around here know me as the guy who always wanted more than what this place could offer. But if I'm being honest, the story I'm about to tell you isn't about ambition or chasing dreams. It's about a mistake I can't undo. See, when I was younger, I thought my father was just another small-town man with no vision. He worked at the same auto repair shop for 30 years, wore the same faded blue overalls every day, and came home with grease under his fingernails. To me back then, that wasn't something to be proud of. It was something to escape from. But here's the truth. The day I turned my back on him, I thought I was stepping into a better life. I thought I was proving myself, showing the world I didn't need to be like him. What I didn't realize was that I wasn't just walking away from my father. I was walking away from the only person who had ever truly stood by me, and by the time I understood that, it was too late. By the time I hit my late teens, the cracks between me and my father were starting to show. He wanted me to stay close, maybe take over the garage one day, but I wanted the opposite. I wanted city lights, money, and freedom from everything that felt small. I remember one night in particular. It was late, and I came home after sneaking out with my friends. Dad was waiting in the living room, the lamp on, his face tired but stern. He didn't yell, didn't curse, just asked, "Danny, is this really the path you want?" I snapped back at him. I told him he didn't understand, that his life was pathetic, that I wasn't going to end up like him, fixing carburetors for pennies. The words hit him like a punch. I could see it in his eyes, but he didn't fire back. He just sat there in silence. That silence haunted me, though at the time I thought it meant I'd won. I thought I'd proven my point, but looking back now, I realized that silence was disappointment, the kind that cuts deeper than anger ever could. From that day forward, the distance between us grew wider. He still made me breakfast every morning, still asked how school was, still handed me a few dollars whenever I needed gas money, but I stopped looking at those things as love. I saw them as shackles. When I turned 21, I made the decision that would change everything. I packed my old duffel bag, stuffed it with clothes, and told myself I was leaving this town for good. My father had no idea it was coming. That morning he was in the kitchen, frying eggs, same as always. The smell filled the air and he asked if I wanted some. I remember saying, "No, I've got somewhere to be," trying to sound casual. My heart was pounding, but I didn't let him see it. When I walked toward the door with that bag over my shoulder, he finally noticed. He asked, "Where you headed, Danny?" His voice was calm, steady, like he already knew the answer. I looked at him and said the cruelest words I've ever spoken. "Anywhere but here." I don't want to waste my life like you did. I'll never forget the way his face fell. Not anger, not even sadness, just this heavy kind of acceptance, like he'd always known this day would come. He didn't try to stop me. He just nodded once and said, "Take care of yourself, son." That was it. No lecture, no begging me to stay. Just those 5 words. I walked out the door, convinced I was finally free. What I didn't realize was that I'd just walked away from the one person who would have stood by me no matter what. At first, life outside felt like everything I'd dreamed of. I moved into a small apartment in Cincinnati with 2 friends from college. The place was cramped, the walls thin, and the rent high, but to me it was freedom. Nobody asking where I was going, nobody expecting me home for dinner, nobody reminding me of responsibilities I didn't want. I picked up a job waiting tables, then another bartending at night. It wasn't glamorous, but the city lights blinded me from the truth. I told myself I was on my way to something bigger, that this was just a stepping stone. But the longer I stayed, the harder it got. Bills piled up, hours dragged, and the friends I thought I could count on started to drift away. One moved out, another got into trouble with drugs, and soon it was just me in that apartment, staring at an empty fridge and wondering how I'd pay rent. I kept telling myself I couldn't go back. Pride wouldn't let me. Every time I thought about my dad sitting in that kitchen with his coffee and his steady hands, I felt a mix of shame and stubbornness. I didn't want to admit that maybe he'd been right, that maybe there was value in the life I had walked away from. Still I pushed forward, convinced I could outrun that emptiness. But the more I tried, the louder it got. The years rolled on, and the shine of the city wore off faster than I ever imagined. My 20s slipped away in a blur of double shifts, overdue bills, and half-finished dreams. I'd tell people I was working on something big, but the truth was, I was barely holding it together. I remember one winter in particular. It was bitter cold, the kind that seeps into your bones. My heat had been cut off because I couldn't keep up with the payments. I slept in my coat, under a pile of blankets, listening to the hum of the traffic outside while my stomach growled. That was when my thoughts started drifting back home more often. Back to my father, to that warm kitchen, to the smell of coffee in the morning, and the sound of him humming some old country tune while frying bacon. At the time I'd rolled my eyes at it. Now I'd have given anything to hear it again. Still, I was stubborn. I told myself calling him would mean admitting failure, and failure to me was worse than freezing alone in that tiny apartment. So I stayed silent, convincing myself I'd figure it out. But the truth is, I wasn't figuring anything out. I was just sinking deeper. And every time I closed my eyes, I saw my dad's face that day I left. The quiet hurt in his eyes, the way he let me go without a fight. It haunted me more than I could admit. It all came to a head the year I turned 30. I had been chasing job after job, never finding solid ground. One week I was managing deliveries at a warehouse, the next I was back to bartending. I was restless, tired, and angry at everyone but myself. Then came the night I got laid off. Again. I remember sitting on the curb outside the bar where I worked, holding a final paycheck that barely covered a week's rent. The city felt colder than ever, louder, and somehow emptier. That night I broke down. Not just a few tears, an ugly, heaving kind of cry that I couldn't control, and the only person I wanted to call was my dad. Not a friend, not an old roommate, not some girl I used to know. My dad. But when I picked up the phone, I froze. My thumb hovered over his number, and I couldn't do it. Too much pride, too much guilt. What would I even say? "Hey Dad, remember me? The son who said your life was worthless? The one who left without looking back? Well, it turns out I'm a failure too." I shoved the phone back in my pocket and walked home. But that moment stayed with me. gnawing at me like a wound that wouldn't heal. For the first time in years, I started to wonder if maybe I wasn't running from him. I was running from myself. A few weeks later, after another string of disappointments, I found myself sitting alone in my apartment, staring at that phone again. It was quiet, too quiet, and for the first time, I felt how hollow my life had become. No family dinners, no familiar voices, no one who truly cared whether I made it home safe at night. I couldn't take it anymore. I dialed my dad's number. My hands were shaking, and I half expected him not to answer. But after a few rings, I heard his voice. Steady, warm, exactly as I remembered. "Danny?" he said, like he hadn't missed a beat, like I hadn't disappeared for nearly a decade. I froze, throat tight. All I managed to say was, "Yeah, Dad, it's me." He didn't ask why I was calling, didn't bring up the years of silence, the harsh words I'd thrown at him, or the day I walked out. He just said, "How are you, son?" And right there, I broke. I wanted to apologize, to explain, to pour out every regret I'd been carrying. But all I could get out was, "I'm tired, Dad. I'm just tired." There was a pause, and then he said softly, "Come home, Danny. You don't have to fight it alone." That invitation hit me harder than anything. After all I'd done, after all the hurt I caused, he still wanted me home. And for the first time in years, I thought maybe I could go back. I wish I could tell you that my father's death changed me instantly, that I suddenly became a better man, wiser, kinder, more grateful, but that's not how life works. Change doesn't come like a lightning strike. It creeps in, slow, steady, with every regret, every flash of memory, every night you spend staring at the ceiling asking yourself, why did I waste so much time? I became quiet. People at work noticed, friends noticed, but I didn't care. My world felt smaller without him in it. For weeks I'd sit in his chair, still faintly smelling of his cologne, holding the watch he left behind, and wonder if he ever knew how much I loved him, because I never said it, not once. I thought he just knew. Then one evening, while cleaning out his things, I found something I never expected. A stack of letters, not written to him, but by him, addressed to me, dozens of them, some dated years ago, some only months before he died. Letters he never gave me. I sat there on the floor, my hands trembling, as I opened the first one. In it, he wrote about the day I was born, how scared he was, how he promised himself he'd never let me feel unloved. Another letter described how proud he was when I got into college, even though I never let him drive me there because I was embarrassed of his old truck. Another one, written not long before his death, said he wished we talked more, but he was grateful just to see me chasing my dreams. Every letter was filled with love I was too blind to see when he was alive. I broke down, harder than I ever had before, not just because I lost him, but because I realized he had never stopped loving me, even when I walked away, even when I made him feel small. My father carried a love for me that was stronger than pride, stronger than disappointment, stronger than time. That night I made myself a promise. I couldn't fix the past, but I could honor it. I could live in a way that would make him proud, and I could tell the people still in my life the things I never told him. I love you. I need you. I don't want to waste time. Because here's the truth, one day the people we take for granted won't be here. One day you'll wish you had one more argument, one more hug, one more chance to say the words you kept in your chest. Don't wait. Don't walk away like I did. Don't realize too late what you've lost. If my father could speak to me one last time, I think he'd just smile and say, "It's okay, son. You were always enough." And maybe finally I'd believe him.